time to give your charcuterie game a kick. Today I'm going to be walking you through a dry cured chorizo. Chorizo is a Spanish style sausage that can come in many different forms. It can be a raw fresh sausage that is ground up that you'll see in some breakfast foods, or it can be smoked, but today we're going to be doing a dry cured version. This dry cured sausage is going to have a few phases. We're going to have our standard sausage preparation where we're going to be grinding meat and incorporating seasonings. But we're also going to be having a fermentation process. Our fermentation process is going to be adding culture to our meat block and some dextrose to feed that culture. That culture will then produce lactic acid, which will give our sausage a nice tang and drop our pH levels. By dropping the pH, we'll be able to avoid a lot of food safety issues. The dry aging process is going to pull moisture from our sausage. That is going to help preserve, but also concentrate the flavors. Now we have to back up a few weeks to see how we got here. So for our chorizo, I'm going to be using a pork butt. You've seen me use this in a lot of videos for different brats and smoked sausages, but this is also going to work really well for our dry cured chorizo. When working with pork and when we're dry aging, obviously the fresher the better. It's going to work well for flavor. We won't have any off flavors that can develop over time. And when I buy them, I get them bone in, so I got to take that bone out first. And then we will be cutting these down into grinder-sized pieces so they can easily fit through our chute. And just like with any other sausage, the reason I like pork butt is the fat to protein ratio with this meat, with this cut of meat, is just, it's about that 20% fat ratio that we're looking for, and it just works really well with sausage. Now before I grind, I want to get this meat nice and chilled, almost so it hardens a little bit on the outside, and that'll keep our fat from smearing throughout the grinding process. Once it firms up a little bit, I'm going to grind in a two-stage process. First through a 3/8 inch plate, and then again through a 3/16. Then we'll be ready to start mixing up our sausage, adding our culture, cure, dextrose, and our seasoning. For our dry cured sausage, we're going to be using our number 555 fresh chorizo seasoning. This being designed for a fresh sausage, we're going to have to add a few things so that we can get the curing and fermentation processes in place. First, we're going to be adding pink cure, and then we're going to be adding some culture. After that, some dextrose to feed that culture. Now I always add water to my sausage. Helps with the mixing process and distributing our seasoning, cure, culture evenly. As for the culture, you really only need a small amount. Check the recipe notes for specific amounts. We're going to stir our cure and culture into our water. The last thing we need to do is add some sugar. And today we're going to be using dextrose. This sugar is going to feed the culture, which then is going to produce our lactic acid, which is going to give us that tang in our sausage, but it's also going to drop the pH. By dropping the pH, it's going to give us that acidic flavor profile we're looking for, but it's also going to help us battle some of those food safety issues. This is the part where you really get your hands dirty. You want to get in there, fold the meat over on itself, squishing it together. What we're doing here is obviously mixing in all of our seasoning, culture, and cure, but we're also starting the protein extraction. Protein extraction is going to help our proteins and our fats bind together so we don't have a crumbly sausage. And I place it in the middle of the hopper and I push down to work it out toward the edges. That way I can eliminate as many air pockets as possible. We're going to be using a 32 to 35 millimeter natural hog casing. I've had these soaking for about 45 minutes in some room temperature water, and that'll make them nice and pliable so they fit onto our horn. I'm going to find the end of one of them here and hold it open, and I'll start pulling some water through. This is going to add water to the inside of the casing and is going to help lube up the casing as it threads onto our horn. Tomorrow, after the fermentation process, we're going to test our pH to make sure it got low enough before we go into our dry aging chamber. Now, instead of cutting one of these sausages open and testing it that way, I have this. So I'm going to roll this up in a little bit of plastic wrap, seal those edges, just like a sausage. Now I'm going to ferment this little piece along with our sausage overnight before we go into our dry aging cabinet. Now we're going to link these up, just like any other sausage, but we're going to make them much larger. Once they go into the dry aging cabinet, they're going to hang down, but also as they age, they're going to shrink a lot. So we're going to make these much bigger than normal. Much bigger than normal bratwurst, at least, should I say. We're also going to go through, just like we would any other sausage, and check for air pockets. If we're a little understuffed, we'll give it some extra twists. And now we're ready for our fermentation process. The fermentation process is where the culture eats the dextrose, which is its fuel, and then it creates lactic acid. This process happens over the course of 12 to 24 hours, and we need to get our humidity up and our temperature up. What I'm looking for is about 80 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're looking for nearly 100% humidity. For this process, I'm going to set it in some plastic bags to retain as much moisture as possible, and I'm going to let it sit at room temperature, which in here is pretty warm, overnight, and then in the morning, we'll check our pH. If our pH is low enough, below 5.0, we will be ready to go into our dry aging chamber. In with our test sample, and we'll seal these up. Now, as far as moisture goes, there's plenty of moisture still on the outside of these casings. That should get us up to the level of relative humidity that we're looking for. We'll see you tomorrow when it's time to check our pH. So I'm going to take our little sample that we set aside. I've got my pH meter ready here. pH meters are really readily available online at this point. So if you're making dry cured sausage, I highly suggest getting one to make sure you're playing by all the food safety rules. So at first glance, our sausage sample here has firmed up a little bit, which is a really good sign. It means our protein extraction has taken hold, the cure is developing, and we're ready to start testing our pH. So we're just going to stick it right in there. We're going to watch that pH drop. Our pH level is sitting at about 5.2 right now. So we're getting pretty close to our preferred level, but we want that to be below 5. So I'm going to let our sausage ferment for a little bit longer to see if we can't lower it a bit more before we go into our dry aging chamber. So it's been about another 6 hours since we first measured our pH levels, and now we've gotten down to a 4.75 pH level, which is well below our 5.0 target, which means we're ready for our dry aging chamber. So I have our chamber set to 55 degrees and a relative humidity of 80%. That's going to give us ideal conditions for dry aging our charcuterie. And for our dry aging, we're going to be using a product from our sister company, Pro Smoker. This is the Reserve 50, which is a dry aging cabinet that is available online now. Now this unit is a great at-home size. It's going to be big enough so you can dry age a primal cut like a short loin if you want to cut some steaks eventually, but it's also great if you want to make some small batch charcuterie like we are here. Now last thing I want to do before I go into the chamber is weigh out our product. Because for this dry aging process, what we're looking for is about a 35 to 40% weight loss before our final product is done. Once it's in there, we'll be waiting for anywhere between 6 and 8 weeks for this to be finished. I'm going to hang our sausage at the twists on some hooks that I'm hanging from our top rack. I want to give them a good amount of space so they have room to breathe and pull the moisture evenly from all of the sausages. It's been about 5.5 weeks since we went into the chamber with our dry cured chorizo. Now I kept a good eye on it and it looked like it was getting close to being done, so I put a glove on, gave it a squeeze to check firmness, which is a good indicator of moisture loss, and it seemed like it was done. I am very glad I checked, because had I gone any longer, we might have had excessive drying and some crumbling, which would not be ideal. So I put it on the scale and we did lose about 39–40% of our moisture, which means we are done and we're ready to try. It looks great, it smells great, so here we go. We'll cut into it there, and you can see that beautiful particle separation. You can see the fat, the protein, beautiful red color from both the seasonings and our cure. Nice and firm, even color throughout. That is a beautiful chorizo. So I'm going to slice this up and we'll see how it tastes. Nice thin slices, about 1/8 of an inch. Give us a nice tender texture. All right, cheers. That is a wonderful chorizo. Getting so many different flavors. I'm getting a good spice level on the back end, which came a little late. Absolutely perfect though, not overwhelming. Got a good sweetness, salty, but not too overpowering. The fermentation that we did with the culture gave our sausage a beautiful tang. Now this is definitely a time-consuming process, as it does take a few weeks till it's fully done. But man, this final product, and with how much you can fit into that dry ager, this will last a good long time. Overall, this recipe was a resounding success, and I'm very happy with the way this turned out. I think any home user should be able to follow this relatively easily with just a few simple steps, and in the end, you'll have some wonderful charcuterie to share. For more information, including the ingredients and recipe, head to psseasoning.com. If you like this video, click subscribe, and you can check us out on all forms of social media. Until next time, I'm Chef Jed. Thanks for watching.